During a party, a woman retires to her tent for the night. By morning, she's never seen alive again. Almost 12 years later to the day, with no clues to go off, investigators finally discover something in 2023 that might lead them to who is responsible. Today we'll be discussing the tragic disappearance of Maddie Scott. Madison Geraldine Scott, known to friends and family as Maddie, was someone who was equally at ease in a party dress as greasy coveralls. Maddie enjoyed photography, amateur filmmaking with her friends, figure skating, horseback riding, hockey, and rugby. She was from Vanderhoof, a 5,000-person tiny mill town in British Columbia, Canada. She assisted her father at MBG Logging as a heavy-duty mechanic trainee. Maddie had a spontaneous attitude and was known to be someone who would give the shirt off of her back to aid a person in need. By the time she went missing, she was 20 years old. Maddie went to a party at Hogsback Lake on May 27, 2011, with Geordie Baldock, an old schoolmate she had just recently reconnected with. Because her crush was going to be there, Maddie cancelled her plans to attend the party with her cousin. Geordie and Maddie intended to spend the night camping. Every year on the weekend of his birthday, the host would throw a celebration, with events scheduled at the venue on both Friday and Saturday nights. Public Facebook advertisements for the event were posted. To go to Hogsback Lake, Maddie drove Geordie in her white 1990 Ford F-150 pickup truck. She found she had the wrong tent poles when she got there, so she went home to get the right-sized ones. When Maddie briefly chatted with her mother at her home, everything appeared to be in order. Around 9:30 p.m, Maddie arrived back. According to Geordie, the event degenerated into a big party, with the majority of the 50 or so attendees in the age range of 18 to 25 partying into the night. At around 10 o'clock, Maddie retired to her tent, only about half an hour or so after putting it together. Maddie texted her parents at this point to let them know that her crush had informed her he only wanted to be friends. According to her parents, she was irritated, but nothing serious. Maddie probably wasn't in the mood to party anymore because Geordie was preoccupied with hooking up with a new person, but she did not attempt to leave. She presumably chose to stay put since she didn't want to take down her tent after just setting it up, and/or because she didn't want to abandon Geordie. Police found some unopened cans and some wine around the campsite, so, presumably, Maddie wasn't too inebriated. At midnight, an anonymous young man called her briefly. Although the details of this call are unknown, Maddie's mother claims that it may have been the son of some friends of her parents who were reportedly camping nearby. It's allegedly irrelevant to the case in any case. Although there is no evidence Maddie gave any pertinent information during this contact, the fact that it was the final thing she did with her phone makes it noteworthy. A small group of strangers arrived at about midnight and joined the others. They were from outside the area, according to Geordie. When a brawl broke out, Geordie was unintentionally shoved into the campfire and suffered a knee injury. It's unclear what started the confrontation, but the gatecrashers soon departed after that. Maddie, according to witnesses, stayed inside her tent during the incident and didn't leave. If she knew about it at all, she probably wasn't involved. Geordie wanted to leave with the man she'd just started seeing that evening, despite being somewhat bruised and inebriated. Geordie was adamant about leaving despite Maddie's pleas for her to stay. Maddie was already in her sleeping bag when she attempted to persuade her to accompany them. She decided to remain there in safety, pitching her tent. She deemed it to be fine, Geordie stated. Her sibling described Maddie as being very hard to persuade. Her mother claims that she was a nice things person who looked after her possessions. There were still guests at the party when Geordie left in her new boyfriend's car, leaving Maddie behind with just her tent and truck. Even those who had intended to camp out began departing the celebration between 1:30 a.m. and 3 a.m. Perhaps the argument ruined the atmosphere. Maddie was asked if she needed a ride by some of the people leaving, but she declined. It's questionable whether they were paying careful attention, but no one mentioned that she appeared intoxicated or in any other way in need of assistance. She appeared to be the only person in her tent. The party host and his girlfriend were the final people to depart the area before Maddie. They claimed they offered her a ride, but she turned them down. Maddie didn't appear to be aware that she was now the only person left at the party. Her mother asserts that she would not have stayed if she had known she would be alone. According to reports, Maddie's phone stayed in contact with the same local mobile tower until 8 AM, when the battery ran out or was physically turned off. Before leaving for work at 8:30 AM, Geordie and her new boyfriend went back to the campsite to get things they'd left behind. According to her, Maddie's tent was unzipped, her rings were strewn across the grass, and her sleeping bag was flung to one side. Maddie wore those rings constantly, and they held sentimental meaning for her. Geordie seemed relatively unconcerned, but she didn't attempt to speak with Maddie. When the host of the party went back to clean up around 10:30 AM, he also saw Maddie's tent. It had now been closed up, probably by Geordie. He assumed Maddie was inside sleeping since her truck was still outside. When someone fell on Maddie's tent while intoxicated, it was flattened and made empty. The parents of Maddie travelled to Hogsback Lake on Sunday in search of their daughter. When they came across her locked pickup truck and flattened down tent, they reported it to the RCMP. One of the biggest searches in British Columbia history was conducted to find Maddie. Throughout the day, they followed her steps as she went to a liquor store and later purchased food. Before entering the party, she was captured on a surveillance camera. Early on in the investigation, authorities assumed Maddie was in the area's mix of gravel pits, creeks, marshes, woodlands and fields, where she might have been hurt or trapped. There were no indicators of struggle, despite the fact that Maddie's tent, truck and possessions were left unattended during the weekend. Nothing was broken or taken. Police searched Maddie's sleeping bag and pillow, pocketbook, camera, personal items, jewellery, hatchet, cooler containing wine and beer, gas can and motorcycle boots. Nothing interesting was discovered. Only two things were missing: an iPhone 4 with a robin's egg blue cover and a sizable collection of keys on a Gothic-style lanyard, and they have never been found. The police assumed Maddie took these goods with her when she departed somewhere. Detectives working on the investigation claimed to have spoken with and ruled out every partygoer, including the majority of the 150 visitors on Saturday night. Geordie rose to prominence as a suspect in the media, but the private investigator for the Scott family cleared her after she passed several polygraph tests and other indicators. Various theories have popped up over the years. One of the leading theories is that once Maddie had left that night with nothing but her cell phone and lanyard, she intended herself on never wanting to be found alive. She walked out without her purse, which according to her mother, she carried with her everywhere. Without a vehicle or money, she may not have been able to travel very far, and no one has reported seeing her after 3 a.m. In addition, Maddie's mother claims that she always told people about her problems, and we know that Maddie talked to her parents that evening. On top of this, she had never experienced mental illness or depressive behaviour. Although Maddie's retirement into a tent could be interpreted as a sign of distress, there is a reason behind it. Her response seems sensible given that her crush had rejected her. Maddie used dating websites and most likely experienced prior rejection. In my opinion, the signs simply aren't there to conclude that her disappearance was voluntary. Secondly, some suggest that Maddie may have experienced a negative drug reaction at the party. Although there is no proof that Maddie ever used drugs, it has been strongly insinuated that they were around that evening. According to this theory, Maddie took something that was provided to her by another partygoer, became ill, went to a tent, and passed away sometime between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m, sending guests running from the scene in fear. The remaining attendees probably then decided either to safeguard their futures or out of fear of retaliation from the individual who provided them the pills, to dispose of Maddie and manufacture a disappearance instead of dialing 911. However, for this to be the case, several witness sightings would have to be blatant frauds. It would be a huge undertaking for a group of people to create an unwavering 12-year-old vow of silence. Perhaps it was an accident. It seemed unlikely that she would get lost if she needed to use the restroom, because there was an outhouse 50 feet away across a gravel lot. Her truck would have been needed for any additional errands, food, a charger, first aid. Despite a thorough search, nothing indicating that she had left the scene was ever discovered. No tracks or other signs of a cougar were found despite the witnesses' reports to the contrary. Maddie loved the outdoors, was an experienced camper, and could be a little impulsive. The neighbouring trails were all well marked, and it would have just begun to get light at the time, so perhaps she went for an unplanned trip. However, I doubt that she would have been in the mood for a sunrise stroll or a plunge in the lake after the night that she'd had. Lastly, comes the idea of foul play. This can be broken up into two theories: either foul play by a known individual, or by an unknown individual. If it was someone that Maddie knew, then this would explain why Maddie took her phone and keys. The 28-year-old Fibjorn Bjornsson, who was a familiar with Maddie, allegedly told people that he knew what had happened to her after she vanished. There were rumours that someone kidnapped Maddie to punish him since he owed drug traffickers money. Fibjorn completed a lie detector test. Police exonerated him of any wrongdoing, but a few weeks after he was declared clear, his decapitated head was discovered in a vacant home. His slaying, according to the police, had nothing to do with Maddie's disappearance. If it was an unknown individual, there are many suggestions of the perpetrator. Innumerable women have vanished or been killed along Canada's Highway of Tears, which passes through Vanderhoof. Despite being in detention when Maddie vanished, Vanderhoof has ties to serial killer Cody Legibokov. Israel Keys, who preyed on strangers in remote campgrounds and other places, is occasionally brought up in regards to Maddie. However, it is unknown if he was present at the time. He lived more than 1,000 miles away. Almost 12 years to the day since Maddie went missing, as recent as May of 2023, an update finally surfaced in the case. Tragically, her remains were finally discovered at a rural property 100 kilometres west of Vanderhoof. This means she was found over 75 kilometres from where she'd been camping the night of her disappearance. Despite this revelation, the police remind the public to not jump to conclusions as they intensify their investigation and wait for details to come out in due process. In conclusion, I think that the witness sightings are reliable, that Maddie was there alone when what happened. I don't think Maddie went for a stroll through the woods between 3 and 8 in the morning. I think she was unnerved when she noticed she was alone, and later left in a hurry because something outside scared her. That would explain why she took her phone and keys with her, possibly after taking off her rings to sleep for the night. Running from whatever was outside, she didn't have time to reach out and call 911 in time. If there was foul play involved, there is no doubt that the police will update the public with more details in the coming months. For now, we remember Maddie for the bright and endearing woman that she was. Vanderhoof clearly does, holding a candlelit vigil in June of this year, attended by over 2,000 people, a staggering 50% of the population. Rest in peace, Madison Scott. If there is justice to be served, it's going to be a short wait.